Hello world, my name is Tim Roswick, and I made a Twitch-enabled versus game where the streamer gets to play against Twitch chat. It was a fun little prototype experiment. I want to share with you the dev and design process. Ultimately, we decided not to go with it, but I want to kind of walk through all the different things that I did and the things that I learned along the way. That's gonna end me. That's gonna end me. And that's what happens when you give Twitch chat the ability to spawn enemies that destroy your base. So that was the main premise behind the game, is I want to be able to build my city, right? Build little buildings and collect resources, and I want Twitch chat to be able to spawn enemies to attack me. But as you can see, that doesn't always turn out how you think it's going to turn out, so you got to put a bunch of stuff in place. So I began prototyping this right after Phallophobia. I wanted something a little more fun. We had a lot of fun streaming Phallophobia development. I was streaming 6 days a week, 6 hours a day near the end there, and I had a lot of fun with my audience, so I wanted to create something we can kind of play together. So I came up with the idea of a versus city builder where I build the buildings, chat spawns the enemies. But as you can see, it turned out a little more complicated than that. So one of the things I first set out on was this idea of rounds. So one of the things I'm building here is I'm trying to make it to where I get 2 minutes of build time, and then when I don't get sidetracked with Phallophobia stuff. But speedrunners are insane, by the way. That was a world record speedrunner run. We had to watch it live. But so I get about 2 minutes to build my buildings, and then the Twitch chat gets 30 seconds of time to spawn enemies, because we tried it to where they could spawn enemies at all time, and they just would not stop spawning enemies. And I also had to make it to where there's a couple problems with it. One, it wouldn't scale properly. So if you had 2,000 people in stream, or you had 20 people in stream, we had to make it to where the 2,000 person stream couldn't spawn 2,000 people. But then we also had to make it to where the 20 person stream could still spawn enough enemies to make it fun. So there was a lot of challenges with that, and I worked on it. I know someone's going to ask what engine this is, by the way. It's Construct 3, just in case you're interested. So we kind of worked on this live. I think we put a total of like 20 hours into it, and this was one of the prototypes that probably went the farthest out of many. Maybe I'll share more prototypes on the channel. But it's interesting building Twitch integration, because like I said, it has to scale to the size of the streamer, but it also has to be fun and interesting. And one of the things that I focused on with this prototype was I wanted the humor and the kind of interesting situations more than I wanted the challenge of the game. So one of the ways that you do that is I actually used Kenny assets. But I also used some leftover assets that I had from my Space Goats game, which is one of my favorite games I ever made. And then we watched the first video I ever made. I don't know why that came up, but it was interesting because when I gave the ability to spawn Vikings or goats, so they had a choice. You could do !goat, and then it would spawn with your little name on there. So that created some really interesting scenarios, because goats would eat your resources and Vikings would attack your buildings. So players could spawn these different, they had a choice, first of all, what to spawn, but also it made it really interesting to where like a goat would be eating resources, but it had a name on it. So it would say like Refraction or one of the other people that frequents my stream, and then I would see the goat and I would be like, fucking Refraction won't stop eating my resources. And so it created this cool kind of dynamic between streamer and chat where like it was funny and interesting, but at the same time it was still kind of cool and challenging. One of the problems that we never really got over was either A, I let you build anywhere, in which case you can spread out and then it's really hard for any of the people to get to you, or B, I don't let you build anywhere and I kind of restrict your growth with like pylons and your range and stuff like that. But then all of your stuff is together, and if someone spawns a goats up north or something like that to eat the resources up there, there's no way to kind of get to them, so you got to kind of work towards that. There's a lot of design challenges. There's a person named Bim in my stream chat that likes me to look at his memes, so we took a straw poll. Oh, that was work bitch, by the way. I have a thing where when I need to work, people can work bitch me. And it plays Britney Spears, makes me get back to work. That's fun. You can see there's a lot of procrastination going on. I don't know if you ever made a game, or if you ever done it live, but it tends to happen that way. And you can just you can get lost in stuff. Generally streaming helps me minimize my procrastination, but this was fun because I've never played a game that I could play with my stream audience before. Generally, like, you can play a game and you can share your experience, but it's kind of one way. So, like, I'm playing the game and I share my experience with you. This was the first time where I had an experience like this where it was kind of two-way, where they could give me an experience as well, and we can kind of play together. One of the reasons we did abandon the prototype, though, was the fact that I couldn't figure out a way to balance it, and I wouldn't even say that's the reason, because I feel like we could have fixed that as a design challenge, but I wasn't feeling the game. Like, it was a fun little, like, weird side project, but it wasn't something that I wanted to dedicate a bunch of my time to. So it, you know, it was one of those things where, like, I don't know, like, you gotta be careful what you dedicate your time to, because the older I get, the more important that is to me. So, one of the things we started working on next, as you can see, we're working on different building types, and immediately what I noticed is when I can only place turrets and resource gatherers, it wasn't that interesting. I needed to have different types of buildings that had different purposes, because that added more strategy to the game. So originally the game is kind of flat. I have turrets, you have enemies, you spawn enemies to kill my turrets, but that's a balancing act all in itself, because, like, how strong do the turrets get? Well, how many people can they spawn? If there's 20 people, the turrets need to be stronger than if there's 5 people, and so on and so forth. So once we got that balance down, the next thing I started doing is strategic, like, buildings, because the way that it works is you could do !goat or !Viking, and then you would put a location. So north, south, east, and west. That's what those little yellow and orange tags are at the top right and left and right, top, bottom, left and right. So you could spawn at a location, and that added a little bit of depth, because before we had that, it would just kind of spawn randomly, and then it was just kind of, it didn't really make sense. But with the locations, you could spawn different enemies at different places and take out strategic objectives. As you can see, though, all I did was I just surrounded the spawn point with turrets, and I was like, okay, this is broken, because it's a spawn point. I'm just gonna surround it with turrets. Why would you do anything else? They're gonna come out of there. So that was a whole nother design challenge, and that was really interesting to try and build around, because and more Phalophobia speedruns. Aw yee. The world record, by the way, is like, look at this, the entire section in like 5 minutes. That's insane. Anyway, as you can see, we get up to some shenaniganery in stream. So go speedrunners. It was fun. This was right after Phalophobia development, so I realized there's a disconnect between when I'm posting this video and when it was actually recorded, because this stream happened like right after Phalophobia development, so we were still big into that. But I was just trying to test new ideas, because I haven't had a chance to work on a new game for a while, and so that was something that I wanted to mesh out. But one of the things that I loved about this game was I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it, but the fact that they could choose where to spawn, they could choose what to spawn, and then their names were on top of the enemies, made it really, really interesting. It made it more personable too, because now, like, I don't know, it's like these people that I'm having a Twitch conversation with, that I just see their username. Now they have like a real world representation, I guess, of themselves, and they're like fighting me, and it's fun and it's interesting, and it kind of made everything more real. And I think it would for actual streamers. I would like to revisit this concept at some point. I don't know if this prototype is the one, but, you know, commercial viability was another thing that I had to take into account, unfortunately. I wish we could all just make stuff to make stuff, but sometimes you gotta make stuff to pay the bills, and the more you can pay the bills with your stuff, the more you can make more stuff. So I wasn't sure that the audience for this game was big enough, and that was one of the considerations I took into account as well, because I wanted to work on my next commercial project. Obviously I wanted to prototype a bunch of stuff, and this was one of maybe 10 prototypes that we went through before we found my next project, which I'll share with you next week. But it was an interesting experience, and we changed a lot of the way that we did things, and I actually learned a lot on this project too, because the whole Twitch integration was a whole nother thing that I had to learn about, and that was a good little learning experience. The map gen, procedural map gen algorithm too, the way that it generates the maps, that was an interesting challenge. As you can see, like once I understand the game though, I start spawning stuff. This is me actually playing the game in real time now. So I start spawning stuff away from the spawn points, and then I just surround the spawn points with the turrets. And the resources pop up randomly too, so like it kind of keeps you on your toes. But at the end of the day, the main thing that I was focused on was variance, because it's a procedurally generated game that you're gonna have to play over and over again with your Twitch audience. So variance was the goal, and I wanted different outcomes different times. And the problem was, like, with the spawn points and with the way that the different enemies acted and stuff, you didn't end up with a lot of variance. You ended up with kind of the same experience every time, because there was an OP strategy. There shouldn't be an OP strategy in a strategy game. The idea being that it's different every time you play, and you have to take different things into account. The OP strategy with this is literally just surround the spawn points with turrets, and when you do that, it kind of breaks everything. On top of that, you'll see this right here, when the spammers decide that they want to break shit, they can. So we never really figured out a solution. I ended up limiting the enemy count, so you could only have X amount of enemies per wave, which was fine, but then like some people would spawn all the enemies and some people wouldn't get to spawn any. Like, as you can see, good old Refraction, shout out to Refraction, just decides to spawn all of the rest of the enemies and they're taking out turret after turret, and it's crazy, which is fun and interesting. I don't think it's ideal. Like, it's funny if it can happen like once or twice, but I feel like that's one of those things that people can abuse, and if someone abuses it, they can kind of, I don't know, they can take away from the experience. Like, I'm talking about repeatedly. Like it's funny the first time it happens, it's funny the second or third time. And streamers are really good at like going with the flow and stuff like that, so they can like like make funny, interesting jokes and keep the audience entertained, because that's the main thing that they do. So interesting, weird scenarios where they can entertain their audience came to be the whole goal of this game. And there are some interesting design challenges that I never figured out. If you have any comments on this, if you have any ideas for some of that interesting design challenge, I'd be down to like hang out in the comment section and discuss some of this stuff, because this would be cool for anybody in the future that wants to make a Twitch enabled game. It comes with its own set of kind of rules and stuff, it comes with its own set of challenges. And I think, one, making it scalable so it works the same with a stream of 5 as it does with a stream of 20,000. 2, making it varied, because you don't want to play it over and over again if it's the same game over and over again. And 3, making preventing spammers and things like that, particularly preventing spammers while at the same time also making it scalable. So in a stream of 3 people, you may need some sort of spamming ability so you can engage, but in a stream of 20,000 you need like hardcore spam resistance, right? So some interesting design challenges. If you have any ideas on those, feel free to leave a comment on how you would solve those, because I'd be interested for sure. This was a fun little experiment though, and I had fun building it and I had fun testing it out. Like I said, in the end there were a lot of design challenges that I couldn't quite solve, and the commercial viability, I believe, of this project was a little too low. Targeting streamers specifically, I think, is a generally smaller audience. I did think about maybe making a pack of these games, like a Jackbox party pack for streamers kind of thing, where it was a bunch of different mini games that people could play with their audience. I still think that's an interesting idea. I would still be down to make something like that in the future, but they'd have to be like really small mini games and just crazy, quirky, interesting little games. And I have plenty of those prototypes laying around, so maybe that's something we do in the future. But hey, if you like this idea, feel free to steal it. I don't care. Do whatever you want to do. If this inspires you, feel free to do whatever you need to do. But it was fun. I learned a lot, and this is what taught me a lot about economy design as well, and balancing economies and stuff like that, because you don't want too many resources because then it's just stupid. You can just build whatever you want. Don't want too little, because then there's a lot of sitting around and waiting. And particularly in a Twitch-enabled game that you know people are going to be playing on stream, you don't want that boring wait. You'd rather have excess than not enough, right? So that was an interesting balancing act. And the procedural generation was another one. I'm actually pretty happy with this. Real quick, just in case you're wondering how I did the procedural, I just would pick a random shape, I would generate that shape, and then I would take a bunch of shapes and overlay on top of the shapes, and then pick a resource type. So I pick a rectangle, and I set those to dirt. I pick another rectangle, I set those to grass. I pick another circle, and I set those to mountains or stone or whatever. And that works out pretty well. So, and you can't tell that it's just me randomly placing shapes and then changing the color of objects. One of them simple, elegant solutions. But that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed this kind of deep design talk. Dev deep dive. That's what we're going to call it. We're going to call it Dev Deep Dive. My name is Tim Roswick, and I will see you in the next video of this series, Dev Deep Dive, I guess. That's it. I'll see you later, everybody. Bye-bye.